When you talk about stress, and especially stress in the modern era, there are several triggers, right? Right from work stress to stress caused due to problems in personal life. This also in turn has a cascading effect on your physical health, your productivity, and takes a toll on your emotional health as well. Right from low self-esteem, insecurity issues, anxiety, depression, to name a few. But is there a solution to this? Can we manage this in a much better way? To help us simplify this, we are joined by Elisha Goldstein. Elisha is the founder of Mindful Living Collective. He's a clinical psychologist, speaker, and author of numerous best-selling books. Elisha's life has been pretty interesting, having indulged in a lot of booze and drug-fueled parties early into his career. Stress had a major role to play leading to this lifestyle, but he had had it enough and took a complete 180 somewhere down the lane. We understand from him that is this development in character arc really common in people? Do we really need to indulge in unhealthy ways for the realization to occur? We then understand from Elisha what stress really is and how does one feel stressed. He outlines the different ways in which people can handle stress in a better way. Stress plays a detrimental role in your health, but does it also affect our glucose levels? Elisha explains it all. Lastly, we'll ask Elisha the one thing people can do every day to manage stress more efficiently. Let's hear more from Elisha now. Hey, Elisha, great to have you here. Really, it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Oh, I love to be here. Thanks for having me.
Really cool. I think since the last time, I think we had done some work on the Ultrahuman platform. Really enjoyed. Before we actually begin, would love to really understand from your side, how did you get here? Like, what's your background story around how did you get into this journey of mindfulness and essentially the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, my story is similar to a lot of people's stories. I think we find, for me, I found this out of a deep need. There was a time in my life when I was working in San Francisco during the dot-com boom in the early part of this century, or the late part of the last century, and I was working really hard in telecom sales, selling people their data lines and in the corporate world. And at the same time, I was playing a whole lot harder. So I was on my off hours or sometimes my on hours, I was really abusing my mind and body with drugs and alcohol. It was a high level party atmosphere there. And I just felt really lost. And so I was seeking, like, there has to be something more. There has to be something that can help ground me. There has to be something that can give me a sense of personal control in my life, a greater sense of meaning. And I was reading stuff, and I was like reading books, and I was trying to, find the answer. And at some point, I got to a point where I was in the south of Market Street, for those who are familiar with San Francisco. And I told my friends that, if you ever catch me with this guy who is up days at a time, like, he was to me like the epitome of someone who was extremely lost in his life. And if you ever catch me with this guy, I've hit the bottom of the barrel, and, come save me, if anything. And so there I was with him. And so I woke up in that moment and just said, like, this is it. I'm at the absolute bottom of my life right now, and I took a chance and just left and walked back to my house, because you can do that in San Francisco. And eventually, my family had an intervention with me, and I went away to a adult retreat center, and it was there that I got in touch with a guy who introduced me to more the experience of mindfulness. I would say he did it through eating, and for those who are listening right now, like, this is a great entryway to really experiencing, mindfulness in its essence with something you do every day anyway. So for me, he introduced me to an orange, and he said, why don't you, just entertain me, and let's eat this orange in this particular way. And I kind of thought at the time he was a little crazy, and I was like, this isn't going to be for me. And so he had me kind of look at it and see if I was seeing anything different, and had me peel back the skin. And I remember in that moment, like, the zest popping up in front of my eyes, something I hadn't really seen before, because typically I'm not probably paying attention. I'm just like eating whatever's in front of me. And then he had me look at the meat of the orange, the veins, the colors, and I'd never seen the intricate nature of the veins in an orange. And then he had me taste it, and it just exploded in my mouth. And he said, well, how was that? And I'm like, that was probably the best orange I'd ever tasted in my life. He said, how does your body feel? And for the first time in a long time, I said, it feels really relaxed. And he said, what would the days, weeks, and months ahead be like if you had more of this? And I said, I would love it. Sign me up. How do I get more of this? This is incredible. And then for the month, I felt like I was flying high, like immersed in this self of reflective inquiry and space, of course, because I was outside of my daily life too. And so then I go back to my corporate world feeling like I'm, enlightened and saved in so many ways. And then it took me 2 weeks to fall back into my old habits. And so that told me something really important. What that told me, Mohit, was that are the people and environments we surround ourselves with, and we can get smarter about this, really make a big impact on our brain's implicit decision making to move in the direction of the things we want to do in our lives, the way we want to live in our lives. And that's really important to pay attention to. So a seed was planted, though, regardless. And I ended up going back to graduate school eventually to support myself and wanting to support other people in a more meaningful life for me and for others. And that's when I got more in touch with the study of mindfulness more formally. I did my own research around it, published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology. I ended up co-authoring a book, the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Workbook, with a mentor of mine named Bob Stahl. And then eventually that unfolded into more books, The Now Effect, Uncovering Happiness, programs, leading global programs like Uncover the Power Within, my personal coaching program, getting in touch with wonderful people like you at Ultrahuman and who are doing incredible work right now. And just kind of proliferating this ability of being of service to raise our sense of insight and awareness and consciousness individually and collectively in the world.
Well, this is really fascinating. Almost reminds me of the Newton's apple story, right? That this is the discovery of mindfulness through looking at an orange instead of an apple, and just by the power of observation, just by observing how you do mundane, everyday things, how you can actually just have a better experience of life, much deeper, immersive, way more immersive experience of life. And he also said another interesting thing, which is how you need to surround yourself with the right people and the right environment. How does that go for a lot of people? Because I think what a lot of people end up doing is almost by their midlife, they end up deciding that this is their environment, and sometimes it's not ideal for the type of life that they want to live. How does that go about? Does it really need a change element in their life? This was really a change element for you, for sure, right? Discovering that this was the rock bottom. What are some of the things that you have seen in people in their lives?
People right now currently are, struggling with a much greater increase of anxiety. There's so much happening in the world right now, aside from the last couple of years of the pandemic and the wars that are going on all over the world. And the one that's most prominently in the news is Russia and Ukraine and what's going to happen over there. And that affects a global economy for so many. And here in Los Angeles, I just came across the headlines today that we're in a historic water shortage right now. And, so there's so much, and people are struggling in their personal lives with their own personal losses that they're experiencing, or job changes and concerns about the future of their own finances. And so there's a lot of things happening, within our individual human psyches and our collective psyches. And when you look at the statistics right now, you see that there is a general spike in anxiety and depression. And anybody that has experienced past trauma in their lives, that plays on that. So they get a resurgence of their trauma that's there, which really ultimately leads to a really frayed nervous system. So we're walking around as individuals with these frayed nervous systems. And so what we need to do is recognize that and recognize that while we're more than our biology and our physiology really impacts our perception and our mood, and that impacts our relationships, which feeds back to our sense of safety or security. And so we need to learn how to take back control of our minds so that we can learn how to relate to our nervous systems differently, recognizing the fraying that's there, and be able to move towards a more skillful relationship to it so that we can soothe it more as we need to, come back into a state of feeling more grounded and balanced in the midst of the chaos that's here. And that's correlated with feeling more resilient. It's a natural antidepressant. It's a natural anti-anxiety. And we can learn how to be in this way in our daily life, even within all that's happening right now. And it sure helps, Mohit, to have people around us. And this is the point that you were noting within your question. It sure helps to have people around us that are also supportive of that for us, or are also doing that same thing. So they're reminding us that, oh, hey, this is the way I want to live. But the reality is we have a whole lot of people around us and a culture around us, for the most part, many of us do anyway, that doesn't remind us of living in this way, that actually plays and preys upon our nervous system's inflammation, because it knows that that's going to get us to pay attention to their sources, their news, their commercials, their what have you, so that they can, increase their own economy. And so we have to, again, recognize that that's the river that we're swimming in, and that's the current that's here. But we don't have to just take a ride on the current of that river. We can also recognize that, okay, this is the way it is. I'm going to take a moment and stand in this river and recognize the current and see it, see everything floating by. And I'm going to really take care of myself in the midst of it, because I have the power to do that. And it starts with practices within myself that can support that. I can learn how to train my brain to calm down, to create more ease, to focus more on what matters. I can learn to organize my environment in a particular way, like the people I make contact with more specifically, who are more supportive and encouraging of my own health and well-being. Also whether that's just even exercising more. Like I know in Ultrahuman, there's a big focus on exercise and strength training and things like that, which is so wonderful. It's a foundation. That's what I like about your app, is that it really integrates the mind and body in a skillful way. And so there it is. We have the ability to train that sense of personal control.
Well, I love the analogy that you made, which is around it being a river. And it's really fascinating that when you visualize it as a river, you can panic around this river of anxiety and stress and all that's happening in the world. Or you can actually learn to swim. Like the way you said, maybe like take a moment inside the river and figure out what's really happening. And then you take a hold of your breath and basically figure out, like, this is the way to navigate the river. That's really, really fascinating, because I'll connect these two experiences, right? The first experience that you mentioned was of eating an orange, first time ever, in a very, very different way. And swimming through the river mindlessly. It's almost the same, right? But once you know how to swim, you know what to, like, it becomes sort of like your muscle memory. Similarly, when potentially you know how to observe, everything sort of like becomes more beautiful, just much more magnified. And double clicking a little bit on what you also said in terms of, let's say, all that's happening in the world, right? So there is a lot of anxiety and stress all around us. And it looks like there's no end to it right now, at least, right? Given the fact that there's one thing after the other that's actually happening. Probably the best way is to build your own armor and maybe figure out a more sustainable way to live your life, so that you actually don't end up being more stressed and anxious around these things. So double clicking a little bit on, like, what are some of these, let's say when you talk about stress specifically, let's take that as an example. First of all, what's stress biologically, right? What does it really mean? How do people feel stressed? Because everybody talks about stress, but how do you understand that this is how you can feel stress? Or is there a sort of like a specific way in which you can identify that this is stress? And maybe some of the ways in which people can actually figure out their way around living more or handling their stress in a better way.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the metaphor you use around double clicking on something. I haven't heard that, and I thought that's so cool. Let's double click on that, like, because it's a technology metaphor, and I think that's really cool to use that as, like, let's focus on this.
It's a boomer terminology. I think most of us don't double click right now, but I think when maybe 20 years back, double clicking was the norm. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So stress is a form of energy. That's all. And, it's a form of energy in our body, and it can be used for good. It's energy that creates strength. It creates motivation. It helps us move forward towards something. It's putting our foot on the pedal a little bit. But what happens is, when the stress gets mixed with uncertainty or the perception of the inability to accomplish some expectation, or there's just too many tabs open at once in our mind, to use the technology metaphor, that's when our body starts going into this fight or flight or freeze mode, and we don't have anywhere to go with it. So the energy kind of compiles on ourselves, and it can turn into overwhelm, which makes it harder to focus on things, or to feel like we can actually do it. So we get more of a sense that we can't actually do this thing, which leads to this like a physiological overwhelm, which can lead to anxiety, which is this sense of fear and uncertainty together. And ultimately, it creates cellular inflammation in our body as the cortisol continues to surge. And that could, over time, if that's chronic, that can lead to disease in our body, and certainly dis-ease in our minds and body, but like chronically over time has been shown to lead to disease. So it's not too much stress over time is not good for us physically or mentally. So the first intervention to me is to be on the lookout for what does stress mean. You want to ask yourself, if you're listening to this right now, how do I know I'm stressed? So when we talk about stress, we typically talk about it when we say, are you stressed? We typically talk about it in the form of something that's a negative in some way. Like what we mean is, it's when we say, are you stressed? Has it like reached the breaking point of like too much? It's not a balanced stress. It's not a motivating form of stress. It's not positive stress. It's more negative stress. And so the question is, for you personally, because it's not a one size fits all, as much as people like to explain it like that, you want to ask yourself, how do I know that I'm stressed? When I ask people that question, or when I ask myself that question, I say, okay, so I notice it. My first response is going to be, I notice my heart rate's really up. I notice I'm breathing like from almost my neck, not even my chest, but more my neck almost. And I notice my shoulders are really tense, and my stomach is beginning to tighten or turn. You know, we're recognizing it physiologically because it's a physiological response. The benefit of recognizing it physiologically versus some people who are really, really in their head, they say, I don't know, I just feel it in my head, which is then okay. So at least we feel it physically in our heads. But if you actually started to connect more to your body, you'll see it has an impact on the entire body. Why is that? Because our brain is part of the nervous system. So our brain is connected and wrapped and it's the connection of it, and the nerve system, the nerves are connected and wrapped all around our spine, and they go throughout our arms and hands and fingers. And so we feel these things all throughout our body. We feel this stress all throughout our body. So the simple intervention, this is something that I speak about in my program with Ultrahuman, and I speak about in my personal coaching program, Uncover the Power Within, is just to be on the lookout for, after you answer that question, how do I know I'm stressed? And you start to recognize the symptoms in your body around it, just to be on the lookout for where and when is your body bracing in the day. That's a sign that stress is really there. And then more than negative stress typically. And so then once you recognize that, now you're stepping into a space between stimulus and response where there's more choice, possibility, and freedom. And in that space of awareness, with that choice, you can say, oh, my shoulders are tensing. Oh, I'm breathing from my neck. Oh, I'm tensing in my back. I'm going to choose to allow that to soften now. So rather than saying like, let me battle the stress in my head, let me battle the thoughts about why I'm worrying so much, or like, what am I stressed about? Or, before you even do any of that, you want to balance out the activity in your brain. And the way to do that is by paying attention to your body, and by noticing where the tension is, and you might soften it or choose to stretch that part of your body out so you can loosen that area of your body. And then what's going to happen is the activity in your brain is going to start balancing out. Then once you have a more balanced out, more blood flow, more evenly flowing throughout your brain, you can say, all right, so what was I stressed about after all? Well, there's just a lot going on right now. It's just like, it feels like there's too much going on. All right. So then the question is, now within this space of awareness, I can ask the question like, okay, so what am I needing right now? And you might take 15 minutes out or 20 minutes out, and you don't do that. If you don't do this already, and you're in business or you're just in your daily life, you don't take a little sliver of time out every week at least to just reflect on your life. Like, how am I doing? Where are the stressors right now? Where are my accomplishments right now? How are things going? Okay, what do I want to do going forward? That is an incredibly important practice to do. It's called having a proactive strategy for your attention in your life. And it's very important and can really create a great sense of personal control and agency in doing something like that. And so in this case, you're just saying like, okay, so what am I needing right now? Maybe I'm needing to exercise. Maybe I'm needing, if we're talking about the Ultrahuman app, maybe I'm needing to start coordinating some more movement and just checking out how I'm doing more regularly. Or maybe I'm needing to step into a state of, I need to make a little space for meditation. Or maybe I need to just go outside and get some sunshine on my face. Or maybe I need to contact a friend right now. Or maybe I need help. Maybe I need to go, I get some therapy. Maybe I need some coaching because I really don't know what I'm doing in my work. Or maybe I'm needing, if you can, a personal trainer because it's just not working. I need some human support in getting this exercise plan going. We get a lot of insights. We get opportunities to make new choices when we recognize where the stress is in our bodies and we begin to soften or loosen it. We have so much more of our faculty of our mind and brain available to us. And it's very simple to do. But that's, to me, what stress is. And that's a very easy remediation to put the control back into our minds and our lives.
Wow. So many amazing things there. I think probably this is one of the first times I've ever heard stress being a form of energy. Like, that really gives it a positive twist to stress, to be honest.
Oh, good.
And the first time I probably heard it for something like this was actually for anger. Like, saying that, yes, anger is a form of misdirected energy and it can help you change things, but probably if you don't use it the right way, you're going to sort of like get subsumed in it. So I think the other interesting thing that you mentioned, really cool, is the fact that because stress is both neurological and also biological, it's like sort of like interconnected. And probably because of the vagus nerve going through your spine and like interconnecting your body, you feel it biologically as much as you feel it psychologically. There is going to be a physiological response. And the way I understand this is, you can control your physiological response. Given that your neurological response affects your physiological response, it would work the other way around as well. Your physiological response, if you can understand and learn and control all these biological factors around breathing, around, let's say, looking at your shoulder tension, you can potentially understand a little bit about your psychology, control some of these stressful factors. But that's a really cool way to think through some of these problems, right? Every problem has a connected butterfly effect. And if you can understand the butterfly effect and control it, we'll be better equipped to handle the problem as well. Does that apply to like most neurological and physiological things that happen to people?
It's just like you said, and the simplest way just to keep it for everyone is that, yes, everything's connected, and one thing impacts another thing in all directions. So you talk about physiology and neurology, and just a little kind of note around the anger piece, just to kind of back up to that for a second. So anger to me is not misdirected energy. Anger is another form of energy. It's an emotion. It's energy in motion. And the reason it's not misdirected is because anger can be used quite constructively. So it can be directed in one way or another. It can be directed well or misdirected, but on its own, there's no judgment around it. It's just a form of energy. It's an energy in motion. I like to think of emotions, like if you put E-motion, it's energy in motion. And so it's just another emotion, and there's no judgment. It's a human experience, and sometimes it can be used for good, and sometimes it can be to our detriment. It's just all about how we engage it. And for the stress, it's all connected. So we can our thought, and I want to include our thoughts in here for a second too. So our thoughts can impact how we entertain our thoughts. Like, for example, if we're worrying a lot, or if we're hating our pain and wishing it away, or if there's a part of ourselves that we hate and we wish we didn't have this part of ourselves, like the part of ourselves that makes mistakes in front of people, and we feel embarrassed. If we hate that part of ourselves, all of these create negative stress on our body physiologically. So these types of thinking and beliefs really impact our physiology. And you can see it in people. You see them walking around. You can see them walking around hunched over. You can see people whose kind of shoulders are turned inward or their faces are torted or something like that. It really impacts the way we hold ourselves physically. And then if you practice and repeat that over time, you start to form your body in a particular way. It's really fascinating. And so you could see it with other people who are walking, quite differently, where their chests are slightly elevated and there's more of an ease around their face, and their thoughts are a little bit different, or they've been working with their mind differently. Either way, could be nature or nurture, and so, or a little both. So but the point is that by changing our physiology, we can change the way the activity in our mind. Like, for example, exercise has been shown, as you likely know, to be really wonderful for mood. And so that mood means we're perceiving things differently, we're thinking differently. And then perceiving things differently and thinking differently is really great for our physiology as well. And so we use these words to try and describe things like thinking and physiology and neurology and our brain, but really it's all the same. It's all connected. It's all we only see it as disconnected because we're using language to try and describe it. But it all impacts. It's all interconnected as one. But we're dissecting it to try and understand, how does this impact that, and how does this impact that. But yes, being able to, that's why meditation helps you bring more insight into how you're thinking, your relationship with your body, your relationship with your emotions. And so you learn how to set, at least with mindfulness meditation, you learn how to settle into and connect more with that space of awareness where you're not tangled up in the thoughts or the sensations in your body or your physiology. You're more just witnessing this, so you can learn and have the personal control to say, well, how do I want to relate to a tense chest, or a stomach that is turning, or shoulders that are tightening, or how do I want to relate to this worrying in my mind that's happening, or this part of me that's hating this other part of me, or this part of me that's hating the pain. How do I want to relate to this? How can I learn to dissolve that or not hold on to it so tightly? And as I learn how to do that, my body relaxes. Interesting. Or as I begin to relax my body, the intensity of those thoughts aren't as intense. Interesting. We can really see how they're like levers that pull the other thing as we do that.
I love the simplification that you made, which is basically language essentially makes us sort of like divide these things into different objective systems. And I would confess that when we work with, let's say, a medical doctor or our sports scientists, it's much easier to sort of like understand the system when you break it down. Though most of the biological effects are actually interconnected. Most of the biological effects are just like your human physiology. Everything actually affects the other thing, and it could be understood in a much better way if people understand this as one system and not like 5 different systems working together. But I love the way you mentioned that, especially emotion, energy in motion. I think I'm going to. It definitely helps me visualize emotions in a much more positive way, in a much more objective way, rather. And yeah, I think the fact that you mentioned that how it is related to everything else. One of the things that came to my mind was like a process like eating, or let's say food in this case, right? What we have seen with the Ultrahuman Cyborg, the glucose monitoring integration on the platform, is that a lot of what we feel psychologically, let's say it's either stress or anxiety, shows up in a biomarker like glucose. And it's almost unreal. Like just a couple of days back, I was listening to somebody, one of the users of the platform, telling us that the amount of glucose spike that I had for a bagel versus getting stuck in a traffic jam is almost the same. It's that significant. So yeah, it's quite fascinating that ways.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Right. You start to see the impacts of, how different things impact us, or how different things can impact us in the same way. It's actually, yeah, it gives you a more of a, in some ways, a meta awareness of, the more insight we have, the more choices we have on, like, how do I want to adjust my life? Maybe there's some things I'm doing that I don't even realize are automatic or not good for me. And so once I have some insight into it, and we can get insight by just paying attention to our own present moment experience. We can get insight by understanding how our nutrition impacts our body and impacts our mood. We can get insight in a variety of ways. And to me, that all falls under the umbrella of mindfulness, as a general umbrella, as this ability. When we talk about mindfulness as a lifestyle, mindfulness is about trying to be aware in the various facets of our life, about how interactions work, how cause and effect works. Everything works off cause and effect. Everything in this universe works off cause and effect, to really simplify and boil it down just to that. And so we're looking at, if I do this, what's the impact of that? I do this, what's the impact of that? And then the interesting thing to think about, Mohit, is the difference between intention and impact. So my intention is to really support myself by by juicing every morning, and having and I heard juice is really good for me. Celery juice is really good for me. So I drink a liter of celery juice every morning, but the impact is I'm on the toilet all day. So the question then is that my intention is good, but is the impact good? So, we have a lot of things that are marketed to us as, this is great for everyone. And the reality is, we have to have a very curious mindset. Nothing's a one size fits all. So we want to have a curious mindset and say, okay, so the intention is for this to be good for me. What's the impact? What am I noticing? And maybe I'm really noticing that it's not about drinking as much juice as I want. What I really start to learn is this much juice feels really good, but after that, it starts to have a deteriorating impact on me. So we learn as we go. And so one of the important mindsets to have to any of this, whether it's your exercise, strength training, or meditation, or mind training, is to have a growth mindset around it. Have a mindset of curiosity and experimentation, because ultimately you're watching like a scientist, and you're saying, how does this impact me? Like, is this supportive for me, and in what doses does this work for me? And so there it is. We want to kind of have that type of mindset and approach to any of this stuff.
Just blown away by the insight. I think curiosity is definitely probably one of the best tools that you can inculcate in your life. Given the fact that a curious mind is often, it's maybe it's not the most relaxed, or I don't think it's in the same dimension, but potentially curiosity is a superpower that a lot of us can use to observe things in a much better way. But Elisha, this has been really, really insightful. And while I was taking notes during our conversation, one thing that emerged throughout the conversation was how you actually simplified everything, and basically it drove it down to the most abstract, simplest meaning of how you can understand things. And with that, I would love for you to for our listeners, what is one of the most simplest things that they could do to understand the stress or maybe like handle stress in a better way? Like maybe like that one simple thing that you can do every day that you can remember right now.
So I'm a big fan of repetition. Repetition gets a bad rap in our culture, different learning cultures. People think that they hear something once and they should get it. And if they don't, it actually has a double-edged sword here. People think that when they hear something, they know it. Yeah. Meaning, like, and if they hear it again, they think, oh, that's not new to me. What, I'm just hearing the same thing again. Well, I'm going to go to the next channel or the next podcast or the next, thing. But really, it hasn't really sunk in until you're actively and implicitly doing something in your daily life. You haven't gotten it yet. And so repetition is so important, because the reality what that does is that continues to kick things top of mind for you, even stuff you know about before. Sometimes I speak on a podcast or in an audience or whatever, and I say, I'm probably saying something you already know, but hopefully I'm just bringing it top of mind. Try and alleviate that expert's mind that gets in everyone's way. So I'm going to repeat something here that I said earlier in this podcast that I think is A really important point that I want you to get, that's probably the simplest way to mediate stress in your life and take back control over your mind in your life. And I'll say again, this is something that I teach in the Ultrahuman course that I have here. It's also something that I bring right to the forefront in my personal coaching program called Uncover the Power Within. And this is around the body. So in its simplest thing, if there's one thing you take away from today, from just listening to this, it's to be on the lookout for where there's any holding or tension in your body. That is telling you that there's some kind of stress response activated. And I would pay particular attention to your face, because we hold stress in our face and oftentimes we're not really aware of it because that's just where we're viewing everything from. And so your cheeks, your jaw, your tongue, particular attention there, but also just throughout your body. And if you notice any holding or tension, that's a moment to celebrate. It's not a bad thing. That's a great thing, because now you have this awareness. Now you're in that space between stimulus and response. Now you have a sense of personal control and choice. So choose to actively soften that area of your body. Choose to actively stretch out that area of your body. Choose to actively massage that area of your body. That is directly impacting your brain and the activity in your brain and the overwhelm and worry and the stuckness that it's in that's activating the stress response. So we're engaging our bodies as the simplest form of intervention. So I'd say that's the key thing. The second thing is to take to heart that repetition is probably one of the most important things that nature has shown us that grows things. Repetition of watering a plant, repetition of exercising and engaging a muscle grows a muscle. Repetition creates learning. So repeat this every day. Every day, just be on the lookout for where your body's tensing or holding, and see if you can expand or soften or stretch out or massage or, engage your mind through your body as the most important initial intervention, just to keep it very simple. There's a number of other things we can do in engaging our thoughts and to learn how to grow from this place, but this is the baseline place to have really great impact in the simplest form. And then we can build from there. But I would say that would be the simplest takeaway that I would suggest here. And then to drop the question in after you do that, just to layer this into another place, which is just like, what do I need right now? And so again, your body may need to move. It may need to exercise. You might have been sitting a long time during the day and you're not gotten out. You might need to connect with a friend. You might need to get some sunshine on your face. You might need to, any of these things. What do I need? I might need to sit in meditation. I might need, just to relax. I might need to just take a break. What do I need? And just ask yourself that question and see what your mind comes up with.
Wow, Elisha, I have no words for this, but it's been such a pleasure. I certainly learned a lot myself as well. And I'm sure that I think our listeners here did learn a lot of concepts, new concepts, but also a better way to absorb it, right? Which is basically figure out the simplest thing. And you also summarized it for them really well. And that's my biggest takeaway as well. I think for our listeners, another thing to notice is for them to understand is that you can check out Elisha's program on the Ultrahuman app. So don't miss that. And from Ultrahuman team, we would love to really thank you, Elisha, for being here. And it's been such a pleasure and for you to do the session with us. And it's been such a pleasure and amazing hearing you all the way along. So thanks a ton. And really, really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. And thank for all you do, Mohit, to bring more strength and healing to the world.
Thank you, Elisha.
There might be different triggers of stress for everyone, but what's common, it does affect our health for the bad, and managing it becomes extremely critical, as otherwise it will lead to chronic illnesses that we should really be avoiding. I hope this episode was insightful for you and you are now equipped with a better sense of managing stress than you were before listening to this episode. If you liked what you gained from this, please share the Ultrahuman podcast with your friends and family. Help them take proper measures for an efficient stress management. I'll see you soon with the next episode.